I've been in the laboratory of researching peak performance and personal development. And I'll tell you what, when you're a Christian, it puts you on steroids there, because one of my best friends was Kim Clement, who had a phenomenal word of knowledge gift prophetically. He was also a concert pianist. And I just love to study people that were even supernaturally gifted. And so when you get that kind of resource experience, it's important to put it down for others. And so people were challenging me, get this stuff into material lands while you're still alive, young man. Put it there. And so gold medal performance right now is where we're focusing. I did, like I said, 30 years worth of research, interviews, and traveling with peak performers. But this young man to my right actually was in the gymnasium. He grew up in the experimental lab, and he was my son. And so Carl literally had to be the practitioner of this. And I mean, he had to grow with me. Obviously, he bears the scars of my learning experiences. But I love talking about this material with him because he has a natural born interest in it. And so he's been studying new material that literally pluses everything that I've got. So I really want him to be with me on this conversation, because we've invested even this year on you're studying your flow and thrive and Zero to Dangerous. Is that the name of the course?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it's a whole additional layer to what we're talking about. But here's what I want to cover. Transformation is so, how should I put it? Transformation should be happening more than it is. You've got the world's most powerful transforming power in your life, and it's the power of the Holy Spirit. Carl, when I was younger, the thing that got me into this and got me into working on me more was a guy said to me, he said, if I went to the gym, 5 days a week or 3 days a week, and I've been doing it for 20 years, do you think that I'd look different than I look right now? And I said, well, yeah. He said, sure. He said, if I went to the gym twice a week, for 30 years, I'd be looking different. Yeah, sure. Well, there are people that are going to church for 10, 20, 30 years who are still struggling with the same problems they had when they started, or maybe they got new ones. They don't look like they've been in the gymnasium, maybe because they've been repeating the same thing over and over again, thinking they're growing rather than expanding capacity. So we've really gotten this down to a science here, and it's not just a Christian science, although I had to thread it through the Bible and through the supernatural and through the lens that I have as a Christian. But the material I work with and a lot of the stuff we came up with comes out of military training and West Point and Olympic peak performance, because there's a way that peak performers, whether they're in the church or whether they're in business or whether they're in arts, there's certain characteristics they have in common. And there's certain characteristics failures have in common. You don't have a corner on that market just because you don't know Jesus. There's plenty of Christians that are getting to heaven just by the skin of their teeth. They're not really nailing the life assignment and doing what they're called to do. They're barely getting by. So, Carl, talk to us about what we've covered so far regarding the three components that go together to make up the matrix of transformation.
So the triad of state, as best we understand it, focuses on three things. Ironically, focus is the very first thing, meaning is the second, and then the physiology is the third. And there's different terminology in different sects, and some people would say cults, but that's not necessarily what we're focusing on, just on the actual information that we can pull from this model. So focus is what gets your attention. The meaning is what you're telling yourself or how you feel about what you're focused on. And then the physiology is another word for that, is the body behind it, the embodiment of what it is that you're feeling and how to actually show physically the repercussions of the thoughts.
And so your emotions and your nervous system is experiencing, and you're storing up a memory physically, physiologically, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, and the meaning?
The meaning is the meaning associated with what we're focused on. It's an aspect of self-talk of sorts.
All right. So here's an example that I use in the training about how this works. The three of them come together and produce a byproduct. And when your focus is on a certain thing and you're saying something to yourself, and when you say it, you start to feel a certain way, what does that produce?
A state.
Exactly. And state is a mischievous thing, because your state becomes, in a sense, the magnetic attractor to other people. I mean, it's a mystical thing. But when we talk about the force of favor, you talk about magic moments or great moments that are taking place, or if you're in sales, the moment when everything connects. If you're a great presenter or a musician or a performer, there are moments when the chemistry is happening. To a great extent, there's some kind of a harmony with your state. How you're showing up is affecting the atmosphere. And great actors recognize that they can transmit an emotion if they're actually experiencing that emotion. So I saw when I was pulling into parking lots when I was younger and started out in ministry that I didn't have a lot of people there in that parking lot. In fact, most pastors, when they struggle with church growth, it's a kind of a cruel thing, but they're pouring their life out to help others, and then they go to church, and if the church is half full, they have to deal with the self-talk in their head. And I got that on the way to church because I looked at the parking lot and I pulled up. Unfortunately, one side of the church filled up before the other, so I pulled up on the other side. That's where my house was located. So I see the empty part always. And I find myself getting depressed. And then I realized this material, Carl. I realized when I pull into the parking lot, I'm focusing on the empty seats. And what am I saying to myself? What's wrong with me? Why don't people want to hear me? Am I really called? I need to do better. I'm just not good enough. And I had all that beat me up victim talk. And then I caught this idea and I shifted it because it was producing a disempowered state. I'm walking in defeated to try to help other people. So I started looking at that and saying, you know what? My focus when I see those empty parking spots is going to be on that space is an invitation for my capacity to expand. My self-talk, the day will come when I will have thousands of people that want to hear me, and that's my invitation to expand. And my physiology was that I'd smile and I thank God for a full parking lot. I made a confession. Well, we ended up having a full parking lot, and I ended up moving on to bigger parking lots. But I'll tell you what, that focus, meaning, physiology, that triad there is real. And it really does produce. Do you have any examples of this, like in your own experience?
I do, for sure, have some from my own experience. One of them is when I'm driving, I'll occasionally get invasive or intrusive thoughts that are very negative and have a lot of darkness around them. So thanks to this training and this understanding how this model works, what I will do is I'll force myself to change my physiology. So if I have this furrowed brow and I'm really deep in thought, I'll force myself to think a happy thought or think of like a nice baby kitten doing a big stretch in the sun. Try to distract myself a little bit so that way what I'm focusing on goes to something that's more positive. And my physiology will in turn switch over too to something else that's more positive. And that changes the meaning of my moment. So instead of it having to be this downcast, distraught, cloudy moment, I can actually pull myself out of it just by being aware of what I'm focusing on and changing what gets my attention. Now, something else I really want us to talk about, which we cover a bit in the material in Gold Medal Performance, but some people have these traps and these triggers that they put themselves in where they have these automatic negative thoughts. And so their brain is automatically going to focus on the negative thing. I have this book here from National Geographic on the mind. Would you mind if I read some of
Go ahead.
some of the stuff in here?
We got 2 minutes,
we got
30
a
seconds.
minute or two here. So, are you thinking straight is on page 265 here. So your view of a situation or a person as all good or all bad without noticing any points in between. That's black and white thinking. And the world that we live in is actually a full color spectrum. It's not a black and white, it's not grayscale. Right. Predicting the worst. Some people will automatically put the worst possible outcome out there and focus on it. And it's like skiing. If you focus on that negative thing, you're going to go towards
it. Right.
Exactly. So if you're predicting the worst, you predict the future negatively without considering others or other outcomes. Another one is missing the positive. You focus on the negatives and fail to recognize your positive experiences and qualities. Some people who have depression have that. Some people with anxiety disorders have that. Other types of mental issues, there's treating feelings as facts. Facts and feelings are not the same thing. You think something must be true because you feel it so strongly, ignoring the evidence to the contrary. And there's other aspects in here too that you can consider, but it just goes to show that if you focus on these negative things, you're more likely to bring them about and you're more likely to feel them, not just internally, but act in accordance with those negative things. And then that type of frequency is out in the environment and other people are going to pick up on that and act along with you based on the frequencies that you're putting out.
I'm not going to be new age, but I'm going to tell you, there is a real science to the law of attraction that when you're engaging people in in the way that creates the right kind of energy, that you bring out a safe place for them to show up. You know, safe place, you hear about that, but it's true. You create a place where they could be their authentic self. And you'll find that when you're the most alive, you are being your authentic self, and you want to create an environment where you're accessing that. But that's a state also.
Absolutely.
And to an extent, it encompasses all the components we're talking about. Sometimes you need to access the lover, and you don't feel loving. How do you do that? Sometimes you need to access the warrior and be bold and go after what you need to do, but you're feeling timid. This model works in the military because it forces you to put on what is not natural until it becomes trained response. And that's what training does. And that's the reason why I say, after 20 years of Christianity, you can see rapid manifestation of the supernatural transformation power once you have the right knowledge. People perish for lack of it, but I look forward with Carl to talking to you more about how to access the total potential that's locked up on the inside of you. We'll see you back in our Level 10 training. Want you to know how much I appreciate each and every one of you. We do this whole business I'm in because of you. And it's been that way for almost 40 years now. You know, in this studio, I do a lot of news analysis. That seems to be the area that I'm called into right now, giving a Christian perspective on the world around you. Just yesterday, I remember the Lord saying something, reminding me about a conversation that takes place in the Bible where Peter, after the resurrection, is getting an update on what he's called to do. And he turns and sees John and he says, well, what about him? And the Lord says, basically, it's none of your business about him. If I decide that he should be here until I come back, what is that to you? You follow me. Now that's an interesting statement because it means that what difference does it make to you? What happens with the next election or with China or the United States? Your job is to follow me. It's with that thought in mind that I put together something called your ultimate life strategy. But I wanted to put my arms around the macro issues that make the biggest difference in fulfilling the call that God has in your life, you following him. And the only way you could do that for me is to have my wife with me, because there's something about the dynamic of the two of us that makes a more complete picture. And so together we did some Bible studies, some training, some teaching, and I just want to give it to you as a gift. I want you to get the ultimate life strategy, and it starts with doing a wheel analysis, not a real analysis, but a wheel analysis, looking at your relationships, looking at your finances in the coming times in the United States, looking at your health, your physical capacity, just an analysis of the assets that God gave you that you are stewarding. And then how do they work together in completing the call of God? So I want you to get this at lancewallnau.com/wheel. My gift to you, lancewallnau.com/wheel, and watch this free training on your ultimate life strategy.